When we make attempts to ram straight the didgeridoo, what we have is a rumspringa of finger-licking good. And the people who stand around and occasionally genuflect towards the ribosomes that inhabit all of their friends' counterpieces. We take a postulary dissemination, and sometimes we find inside of a thicket of myrtle a tiny cup of tea with which we can toast the celebrations of the referendum. And nobody looks inside their hearts and nobody says, the truest part of my biceptacle is the ways in which they waft towards Shalandrolum. And people who often think that sometimes they can unwrap half of their face and put it in the misanthropic vestibule, these people say, I could shimmy towards delinquency, or I could fraternize with the marble-headed possum people. And none of them say, if I took off my widdershins, I would be a backhoe farmer, and I would take all of the children of the Decepticles and I would make them into a nice little hamstrung balachalum. And I don't think that standing in judgment of the way that these filigrees take upon themselves a delicious meat that is foregrounded when an archer-faced portrait maker takes upon themselves the remonstrance of the dog. So, if we would dearly desire to circumvent a thistle, we would have the responsibilities of temerity. And I don't think a horn or a breastplate can be an excuse for a fraternize wiggle. I think that when we are enveloped in decorum, we take an anklet or a shin guard or some kind of protective thing that only really protects the underside of the knee, and we say, I will jump into that pit of spiky things. And yes, I may be lacerated upon my bosom and my tush, but the underside of my knee, nay, shall not be pierced. And what kind of holiday is that? Would your children and would their tickle fronds make all of the clumps that have accumulated on the bespackled motortia? Would these things merit every single bit of courage that must be wrought upon the anvil of disseculum? Would they take a stance? Would it be worth the building of a conrepture that anybody who sings freckle songs would have to quaff? The questions that we ask ourselves when we find a trickle coming down from Robespierre, these questions are a mortuary. And there's a garden around the mortuary whose flowers are merely bunk. And to walk among that foliage of denoculation takes a broad heffalempture. And the ways in which the bustle and the train of the restrictive proto-garmenture look upon our vocabulary with contempt are each one of them a kind of disinviduation into which identity besmirches. And so if I was going to guzzle a gallon of Promonchature, and if I was going to be the most audacious among the tiny little pickleheads that always look inside folders and try to find excuses for their millet, if I were among that number, I think I would raise my hand when the corporal passed. I think I would ask for attention that is usually only given to a bestial-plated Mormon orphan. And I think that I would deserve that specific attention because alone among the sorry dreck in the river of caution, I would have guarded in the incidents that I had several bolsters around my postulate. I would have guarded dear the flimsy knuckles of cherry men who bilk. And those who bilk are forever condemned to fret. And so, yes, I would raise my hand for the corporal and I would be doomed to a bilky fret. And I think that in conclusion of those adventures of youth that sign us up for a predicated percolation, we would have to say, don't cut your hair like that, or else you'll fall to a brick. Thank you for listening. Comments welcome.